Hello, I am Blas Pyri, and I'm going to make a presentation about the creative processes in visual music. So I will analyze some examples of my work, but try also to set a more general description of the processes in visual music. So I'm going to talk first about my specific background, which is music, and in particular electroacoustic music, or tape music. And tape music at its core, it's about recording or synthesizing sound, which you record, you edit, you process, maybe you apply effects, and then you create sequences that you re-record. And this becomes the new raw material on which you can cut, splice, create rhythms, etc. But the fact is that the sound is the raw material, and it is the processes of transformation that creates maybe the rhythms or the general texture. And somehow I have applied this mentality, this approach to also the creation of music. So this would be to transform the image also as a raw material. And in this sense, it's very different from classical animation, where you have drawings or image synthesis that comes from scratch. Here, I always depart from an image which has been recorded and on which I apply some processes. So basically, there are some processes that are linear in time. So for instance, when you change the color or the luminosity, the light, and also when you make a blur or you superpose two images, so you don't change them in time. But there are sometimes non-linear processes which are like multi-exposure, motion blur, and things that kind of change in time when they are applied. But also there is some transformation, and that I use a lot. So for instance, if you change the color or the light of an image, it's not like a color correction when you are doing like classical film, but you apply it in a manner that transforms the image and creates, I don't know, a new light or a new shape, etc. So any process that is time linear, motion blur, for instance, can be also changed in time, and then it becomes a temporal evolution of the image. So let's talk about, for instance, evolution in time, and it's interesting to see the chronophotographic. So on top we can see the photographs of Muybridge, who, so in this case it's a variation of the nude descendant les escaliers, so a nude descending the stairs. And these are different photographs in different times of the process. And we can see here on the left that in this case it's a photograph superposition, so this is multi-exposure, where all the processes in time have been overlaid, superposed. So this is a multi-exposure, and we have also the famous painting by Marcel Duchamp, which refers to this process. But all this is static in time. And here, for instance, we have another pioneer of chronophotography, which is Etienne-Jules Marais. And here we have also the trajectory of the image that is recorded and stays in time, in one picture. So it transforms the picture. And here I would like to show something new, which is an example of Norman McLaren, who is really someone very important in abstract visual music or abstract animation, but also applied different processes to video dance or dance film. And in particular here, he applied kind of the multi-exposure to the image. So in this case, we have the picture of two dancers, and this image is overlaid. So this is in post-production because you cannot do it in production. So he applied over and over again with a delay the exposure of the image in order to create these shapes that evolve in time and that give some trails that reflect the movement. So it transforms, it creates a new image, and this image is also dependent on the time. So this was done by hand, really taking the film and superposing it, and now we can do it with digital tools, but still it's a quite complex process to do. And the second point that I would like to talk about is music and image. As I always do the image and the music, it's always very important to know if we are doing music for the image or adapting the image to the music. In any case, it's usually easier to, when we are doing abstract visual music, to adapt the image to the music, because the music has really a perceivable structure and has a temporal logic, a temporal structure that anyone can perceive. And when we do the other way around, for instance, like in narrative cinema, we create the montage, the editing, and then we apply the music to it. But when we do it for abstract images, there is not this perception of a temporal structure. So that's essential. So in general, music has applies kind of a semantic and psychological aspect to the ensemble, as for instance, it can be joyful or dramatic, neuter, I don't know. And also the fact that the music, for instance, is electronic or instrumental, or it's a voice, it will change very much how we perceive the image. So it will be either a kind of an electronic image or on the contrary, something more human. So it's really essential. And the most important part of this relation is the temporal congruence. So music has often or not phrases and can have a directionality, and it can force the image to adapt or to, I don't know, absorb this structure. Also, it's important if we have a music which is very minimalist and which is only like ping, pam, pam, separate notes, or if we have a very complex music with a lot of textures or a rich harmony. So often animation, abstract animation, takes very very minimalist music, and on the contrary, I try to create complex music and create a complex image for it. So the global aspects of the music and the image that will make it work together or not, or have an opposition, can relate to the intensity, the harmonicity, the timbre of the music, as opposed to the color palette, the light intensity, the density of movement, etc. in the image. And also, as I was mentioning, there is this question of a rich and organic image or music versus something minimalistic, which are separate notes and simple shapes. So now I would like to analyze some examples of my pieces to understand some of these processes. With this piece that was selected at Pontirraya, there is music made of a lot of little notes that kind of echo and that create this rich texture of little things. And it is not so much corresponding to little events, but it's more to this complex kaleidoscopic film. So in this case, there are a lot of mirrors that create these shapes that have a lot of small textures. And these mirrors evolve, so they create also a movement, like if a camera was passing over these shapes that are also evolving. So this is an example of using the mirror, the kaleidoscopic effect, as a way to create new shapes, but also to make new movements. So I have made some experiments by changing the music and maintaining exactly the same image. So for instance, here we have music by Brahms, a piano ballad, which is slower and somehow gives a more slow feeling to the image. And also we don't see anymore so clearly all these little events and pieces, but more the general structure. I have made another variation of the music with the violin concerto of Brahms. So here we don't have any more events, but it's a long continuing melody. So in this case, we see the long evolution and we don't see anymore so clearly the small events that happen. So it kind of develops the long phrases, the long structure. finally, I have used an electroacoustic music, Je Cure Pas, and this is a dark music with a lot of low-pitched textures. And in this case, the same image becomes more dark or maybe more aggressive. So in this case of yellow and blue, so the colors refer to the flag of Ukraine as an homage or an encouragement to this country. I have used a music which has like very clear phrases with a lot of directionality and a lot of clear musical events. And the image has been adapted really with a very tight synchronicity as an experiment. And in this case, I have used an image, so there was elements in movement, and I have also made a camera movement, and then I have made a subtraction with a delay of the layer of the image by itself. So it's only the shapes, the silhouette that remains when the object is in movement. So I have worked on it, made some kind of delays, so some multi-exposure. I have saved it, and then I have applied these kaleidoscopic effects that also evolve and add new movements and create new shapes that appear and disappear. So that's made with the kaleidoscopic effect in combination with the original movement. And then there is a very clear work of editing to create this synchronicity between sound and image. So this was my second piece of abstract works. And here what's interesting is that both the image and the music, the sound, are evolving slowly and continuously. There are no cuts and no specific events. And actually it's harder to make a congruence, a synchrony between the music and the image when you have to really make a evolution, a continuous evolution. Because when you have clear cuts, whatever you put, it works. So this is actually more challenging. In this case, the raw image was a still life, and the movement is made with the camera. so it's slow movements that go progressively from one part to the other. And in this case, I used a very shallow depth of field. That means that there is just a small part in focus, and the rest is out of focus. It becomes progressively more blurry. So this makes that there is an evolution also of the textures, but always taking this kind of organic but blurry nature of the image. And then there is a lot of superpositions, subtraction, etc., and transformation in post-production to create the general and final shape. So in this case, I really wanted to study the concept of energy in music and in the image. So I had made an image with a lot of movement and a lot of energy. So first I edited the image, but then I had to make music to have really a progression and to kind of make a structure for this image. So a lot of movement and energy in this image. In this case, the music is really more dramatic, with low sounds and an evolving harmony. And this gives this dramatic effect, maybe too much, to the image. So in this case, the image was made before and the music was created for the image. And I have found that the way I made the image was not a very structured way. By adapting the music and creating a music that kind of stresses, underscores the moments of the image, I have made something that actually even underscores the lack of a structure. But it's still a piece that is interesting. One thing that is in process and I would like to achieve is to have longer abstract pieces. So for that matter, I think that I need to depart from a structured music. So I'm using a music with voice and complex evolutions that has kind of a structure, and I am trying to see if I can get the image to follow and to absorb this structure and to create a longer piece, even if it is abstract. So that's one of my main goals. So thank you for your attention, and well, this was a short explanation of my processes of creating music and image.